Disclaimer: all the story and images/graphics used in the video belong to their respective owners. I or this channel do not claim any rights over them, all credits to the respected owner. Chapter 71, J.K. Silver. So, let the championship officially begin. The host's words called for the cheers from the crowds. They began cheering for their specific champions. Hey, do you know who's going to win? Ain't that obvious enough for everyone to see? It is obviously Mad Lion. Look there, it seems that there are a few fresh meats this time. I can't wait to see how they get trained in the ring. Do you think there's a newbie who can win the championship today? Stop daydreaming there. Since when had newbies win the competition? Only those that had been here a few times have a chance of winning. What daydreaming? It's already almost nighttime. Then stop night dreaming. Can people control their dreaming time? Just stop sleeping. I'm talking with you, how am I sleeping? Figure that out yourself. As the crowd was still clamoring, the host spoke again. Now, to the first part. We always talk about the rules of the championship as there are always some newbies or some with short memory. Ha ha ha, the crowd laughed at the host's words. It wasn't long before they forgot about the arguments that they were having with their friends or neighbors not long ago. Now, the first rule of the competition is that, by the end of today, there will only be 8 fighters remaining. This is to ensure that the fights tomorrow would only be epic. Another thing to take note of would be that each fighter has 3 fights. 3 wins and you'll proceed. These people will fight once again, the same thing as before, 3 fights, 3 wins and you'll proceed. Although the rules seemed harsh, at the end of the day, they only wanted the strongest fighters. So, if one was unlucky to encounter the strongest opponents in all the 3 matches, then he was bound to lose. Furthermore, there was nothing like 3 chances. Once you lost a single match, you would disappear from the competition. After all, the prerequisite of entering the next round was to win 3 matches out of 3. So, even if you win the first 2 matches, as long as you lose the last match, you would be disqualified. The rules of losing the match are simple. You lose if you stay on the ground to the count of 10, you're kicked out of the ring or knocked unconscious. Please, don't blame us if you have much vitality in your body and you have much pain tolerance and that you're beaten to death without admitting defeat. Remember, all of you who are fighting in this arena have signed the agreement contract that if you die in the ring due to your stubbornness, this has nothing to do with the ultimate arena. These rules were directed to the fighters and they could hear them clearly as the speakers in the changing room transmitted the host's voice to them. Since there are many fighters but less time, each fight will only have 10 minutes. If the 10 minutes are over and there's no winner, both the fighters will be disqualified. After talking about a few more things in 5 minutes, the host finally stopped and looked at the VIP room. The moment that he did so, a loud sound of a gong echoed in the arena. Of course, although it was loud, it wasn't deafening at all. Now, the fights are going to start at this moment. The draws are random, nothing is planned. Let me stop my big mouth from running any further and let the first draw of the matches begin. As soon as his words faded, a screen appeared at the arena's center. It was in form of a box. And it was a projection of a screen and not a real screen. Names of the fighters began appearing one by one on the screen projection before being replaced by another. Not long after that, a name was displayed on the screen. It was none other than Dingo. The moment that the name appeared, the crowd cheered. From their chattering, it could be known that this Dingo had been here a few times already. His performance wasn't bad as he was able to make it to the last round of the preliminaries in the previous 2 months. It was just that he had met some tough guys in the last elimination matches and was eliminated. Not long after the host shouted the name that was displayed on the screen, a bald-headed man came from the changing room. His steps were quite confident as if he was going to win the match already. When he appeared, the crowd cheered a lot. They knew him and thus, he had accumulated a good number of fans already. As the names on the projection rolled, another name was displayed. This time, it was J.K. Silver. When this name was displayed, there were no loud cheers as those when Dingo had been selected. The reason behind this was that the person this time was a newbie. What a bummer. I was expecting a good fight. It turns out that it's a newbie going to fight. How disappointing. Anyway, what's the use of the fight when we already know the results? That newbie has to surrender as fast as possible so that we can watch another match. You guys don't know a thing. There are newbies that end up winning in their first debut. That only happens in novels and TV shows where the MC is so superpowered. As the crowd talked, Jack walked out of the changing room calmly. Although he had expected to test his maximum strength here, he was quite disappointed the moment that he saw the fighters here. The way that they carried themselves already told him that they didn't know how to fight. Well, that was to a standard of a professional combatant like him. Now that there was no challenge here, he decided that his reason for participating this time would be to finish the system mission and get the good things after he won the bet. Although the crowd couldn't see his upper part of the face, they could definitely see his blue eyes as well as the special silver hair. Plus, the well-carved chin, they could already guess that Jack was handsome. But that made their impression of him fall further. According to them, a pretty boy had decided to come to a ring where men fought. This was no different from suicide. Jack never cared about what they were thinking and stepped onto the ring after following the stairs. Although he could simply jump onto the ring, there was no need for him to be so showy. He walked forward and stood in front of Dingo. The two stood opposite each other and gave the crowd such a contrasting image. Although Jack did have a good body, in front of the bulky and tall Dingo, Jack was no different from a small boy in front of an adult. Such contrasting difference made the crowd boo at Jack. And at the same time, bets were placed and most of them were on Dingo. Edwin, do you think that kid of yours can win this round? Austin laughed as he asked sarcastically. Edwin looked at him as if he was an idiot. If Jack had agreed to bet with Austin for a stake that was worth more than $1 billion, he must have confidence in his abilities. As a result, Edwin believed that Jack would definitely be able to win this round. Although he was a little uncertain, he still believed that. To prove that, he placed a bet worth $100 million on Jack. The moment that he did this, the other big bosses that were present in the room couldn't help but look at Edwin with surprise in their eyes. After all, this was the first time that they had seen Edwin make such a bet that he was sure to lose. Now, they thought that Edwin might have made the bet because he was provoked by Austin. So, they simply shook their heads at this. There was nothing that could be done as once a person placed a bet, there would be no refunds. It seems that you're confident in that little chap of yours. Just look at the difference between the two. That boy is skinny while Dingo has muscles on him. Do you think that boy can compete? At this time, Austin was no longer calling Jack a brat. After all, if Jack could give out $1 billion worth of assets when he lost his bet, must have some background. But even so, he still referred to Jack as a boy. Body size doesn't show the strength. Edwin said indifferently. Why have I not seen a situation where the thin fighters win against the bulky ones? Austin sneered. Maybe you're blind not to know that you're an example. You have a bigger mouth than me, but you've never won against me. Edwin replied with a cold smile. What are you two talking about? At this time, a man in a green and yellow suit asked. Just something small, Linus. This guy doesn't know when to quit and thinks that he can still change the tide even after he'd lost. Edwin smiled as he replied. You're the one that doesn't know when to quit. Look at the two. You already know that your boy has no chance of winning and yet you still placed $100 million on him. Austin retorted. Linus looked at the ring and smiled as he looked at Jack. He could see that although Jack was standing in front of Dingo, he didn't seem nervous at all. In fact, it was like he was ignoring the opponent and thought that he wasn't going to fight. Just from this and knowing about Edwin's character, Linus smiled and placed his bet as well. And he placed it on Jack. Jack's current odds were at 1 to 3.5. When the others saw Linus place the same bet as Edwin, they were surprised. But Edwin wasn't that much surprised as he knew that Linus wasn't someone that bet on just anybody. He must have noticed something. Dark lines appeared on Austin's forehead when he saw this. He was just about to speak when the sound of a gong echoed again, indicating the start of the match. Chapter 72, Is This a Championship? On the ring, Jack looked at Dingo nonchalantly, completely ignoring his provocative gaze. After all, if this guy was not as good as Scarred Tiger, how could Jack even have time to waste on him? The earlier he finished the competition, the earlier he would receive his rewards. So, Jack was simply waiting for the bell to ring to indicate the start of the match? Jack was quite doubtful about that, considering that it was going to be a one-way beating. It was not that Jack was arrogant or disdainful, it was just that it was the truth. After all, with his current capabilities, he had yet to meet his match. The 5 minutes of wait was to let those that wanted to bet to place their bets. There was data about the two in the ring being displayed on the screens in the air. Of course, the information was only the basic ones that they had given during their registration. Dingo's information showed his performance during the past 4 months that he had been here. On the other hand, Jack's part showed that he was a newbie and this would be his first match. In other words, he had never fought in a competition before and this would be his first debut. For this exact reason, Jack's odds were high. And there were even less people betting on him to win the match. And these were those that wanted to try betting on the dark horse. If it just so happened that Jack was the dark horse, it was a sure bet that they would make a fortune. When Dingo saw that Jack didn't even seem to care about his presence at all, he felt that he was being looked down upon. As a man with his own pride, how could he allow some nobody to tarnish and mess with it? He has been fighting in this ring for 4 months now. And 2 of those months he had been able to get to the last round of the preliminaries. This time, he was trying to go for the chance of reaching the top 8. But, in the first round, there was a small opponent that didn't put him into his eyes? How could he not be angry? He looked at Jack as he said, "Listen here, kid, you better surrender as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to make sure that I break each and every bone of yours." His words weren't said in a low voice but in one that those that were closer at a range of 100 meters could hear him. And with the host being closer with the mic, although it wasn't loud, the crowd could hear these words clearly. As a result, a commotion rose among the crowd. There were some that wanted Jack to give up already, while others felt their blood boiling at the thought of how Jack's bones would be broken. When Jack heard Dingo's words, he frowned. He once again wondered, what's up with people nowadays? They just can't shut their big mouths at all. They simply throw around their words without thinking or knowing about who they were facing. Or could those who came to this arena be barbarians that didn't like to use their brains? Seeing that Jack only frowned but said nothing, Dingo wasn't pleased at all. He spoke again, "Since it seems that you're so much reluctant, I will have to teach you a good lesson. I'll remove that mask off your face after I strip the clothes off of your body. I want to see how you're going to face your girl in the future." There was a sinister smile on his face as he gazed at Jack. He was sure that he could be able to do these things as long as he overwhelmed Jack. And, although he'd witnessed Jack pushing Scarred Tiger's hand to the side easily, he simply thought that it was due to Scarred Tiger not being prepared and not using his full strength. Furthermore, he would attack Jack and absolutely no chance to surrender in the ring. The moment that the ladies amongst the spectators heard his words, they blushed shyly. But there was a glint of expectation in their eyes. There were even some of them that were shouting in support of Dingo's words, supporting this action. Jack's eyes turned cold the moment that he heard Dingo's words and the cheers from the crowd. His lips twisted into a cold smile as he gazed at Dingo. "Since you're so much into embarrassing me, it won't hurt to embarrass you too, right?" Jack thought to himself. Although he wanted to make sure that he finished the fight faster, there was no way that he could stop punishing someone. Using 3 to 5 minutes to embarrass someone wasn't that much to him, he could afford it. Dawn. At this moment, the gong sound echoed again. And with that, the host spoke, "The betting period is over. Now, it's time to witness the match. In the count of 3, 2, 1. Fight." The moment that the host started counting, he had already began retreating from the duo. By the time that he said one, he was already closer to the edge of the ring. And upon shouting the word fight, he had already turned heels and fled from the ring. His movements insinuated a round of laughter and mockery from the spectators. It wasn't that he was being chased from the ring. It was just that there was a time that the host, who was the referee as well, was caught up in a fight between two fighters. In the end, he was crippled after he received a fierce kick on his left leg. Nowadays, those that were hosting the competition made sure to rush out of the ring before the fights began. They always judged the match from out of the ring. Although it wasn't that easy, it was safer. The moment that the host allowed the fight to begin, Dingo wasted no time at all and attacked Jack by throwing a punch. With his frame, the fist was big and heavy. If this smashed into an unprepared man, it would definitely break a few bones if the ones that were hit were the ribs. Seeing the punch coming his way, Jack decided not to counter it at all. Instead, the moment that the punch got closer to him, he simply shifted to the side slightly, avoiding the punch. After that, he didn't move again, he simply stood there as he looked at Dingo. On the other hand, neither Dingo nor the spectating crowd had expected that Dingo would miss a stagnant target. Of course, this was the way that most of the spectators thought. But, for Dingo and the other fighters and the big bosses with sharp eyes, they had noticed that Jack moved a little to avoid the punch. The movement was well timed and precise. Although surprised, Dingo threw another punch. But, the result was still the same, he still missed again and again. What the heck is this Dingo doing? Does he think that we're in a circus? Maybe he thinks so, considering that the way that he's attacking is like an angry and violent monkey that is attacking without a plan. Can this match be rigged? How can that be possible? I don't think that I have ever seen the championship matches being rigged. You guys sure are idiots. Just look at Dingo's expression. It shows that he seems frustrated that his punches are missing. Look at that pot's bottom face of his, it looks like he's going to burst from anger. Now that you mention it, I can see that. It seems that there's something wrong with this J.K. Silver. Ha, country bumpkins that can't judge what they're seeing. Can't you see, Silver, they're making small movements? He's dodging the punches with the most subtle movements that you careless bunch aren't observing. Your sister is a careless bunch. Do you think I didn't see it? It was just that I wasn't saying anything. Whatever, just suit yourself. Dingo, on the other hand, upon seeing that his punches couldn't touch Jack, he immediately resorted to throwing kicks. He was someone that had been in tens of fights even before joining the arena. So, he knew how to react. Although he was angry, he didn't dare to be careless at all. He threw a kick that formed an arc heading towards Jack's head. This time, Jack knew that he would have to make a slightly bigger movement. So, as the kick approached from his left, although from other people's perspective it was fast, in his eyes, the kick wasn't fast at all. He simply bent his body backwards, allowing the foot that was set on hitting his head pass before raising his body. Surprisingly, ever since the fight began, Jack hadn't moved from his spot. Only his upper part of the body moved, but his feet remained on the same spot. Upon missing, Dingo threw another kick. But, the result was still the same. Jack easily dodged his attacks. This made him frustrated in that his anger began clouding his thoughts. He decided to go for Jack's legs next. It was also at this moment that Jack thought that he had played with Dingo enough. He thought that it was time for him to eliminate him. As the leg swept towards his feet, he took a few steps backwards, evading the sweep. And just like that, Jack continued evading the attacks while moving. Dingo, on the other hand, had already gone crazy as he attacked without thinking. His mind was only thinking of pummeling Jack to a pulp. He jumped forward as he threw a punch towards Jack's face. But suddenly, Jack moved 2 steps to the side. Since Dingo had struck forward with great momentum, he failed to stop himself when he found that his body lacked somewhere to step on. And before long, face first, he dropped out of the ring. It was only when he felt the pain of dropping face first from a height of 1 meter and great force that he regained his senses. And at this moment, the while arena was silent, nobody speaking as they couldn't accept the results that they were seeing. But, They couldn't be blamed, as even Dingo himself found it hard to accept the fact that he'd been defeated in the most embarrassing manner there was. Is this a championship, really? I don't think you should participate in a championship competition. You're only demeaning the meaning of the word championship. At this moment, Jack's words reached Dingo's ears, telling him that everything was true. Chapter 73. Does that look like a newbie to you? Is this a championship, really? I don't think you should participate in a championship competition. You're only demeaning the meaning of the word championship. At this moment, Jack's words reached Dingo's ears, telling him that everything was true. Jack didn't shout out his words, and only Dingo heard him. Although he thought that way, if he said it loud, he was sure that someone would take it as a provocation. As a result, he would have to deal with a few more annoying flies and would be forced to put into action. FSP. It wasn't that Jack didn't want to earn more money. It was just that he still had other things to handle, and there was no reason to bulk work on his head. Jack turned and gazed at the dazed host. Then, upon seeing that he wasn't announcing the end of the match, he asked, "Have I won?" Host. It was only after a moment that the host finally nodded. He looked at Jack, and upon seeing that Jack's gaze was still on him, he couldn't help but ask in a shaky voice, anything? You haven't announced the results yet." Jack was speechless at the host's behavior. But, after looking around, he noticed that it seemed that it wasn't just the host, but the spectators as well. They were currently staring at him and Dingo, who was still dazed, with blank expressions on their faces. He wondered what had happened. He had simply played with Dingo a few times before deciding to end the match. In the end, the way that he'd won had made the crowd quiet. The moment that Jack decided to humiliate Dingo, he had planned on this. Surrendering before the fight was one of the most shameful means of losing in such a competition. But, if your opponent was far stronger, there was nothing wrong with admitting defeat. But, there was one that was shameful no matter if your opponent was strong or weak. That was, being thrown out of the ring. This was shameful as it showed that you couldn't even maintain standing in the ring with the opponent and was pushed to the edge. What was even more shameful was to throw oneself out of the ring, just like what Dingo had done. Although it was under the influence of Jack, at the end of the day, he had jumped out of the ring without anyone touching him. What's more, he had been defeated even though Jack never attacked, not even once. This one added to his boasting words at the start. It surely would be a huge blow to Dingo. The moment that Jack reminded that he hadn't announced the results yet, the host finally understood that there was a duty of his that he'd not carried out. He rushed to the stage as excitement appeared on his face. The moment that he got to the center of the ring, he shouted, Dingo was kicked out of the ring by J.K. Silver. For this round, J.K. Silver wins and proceeds to the second round of the preliminaries. On the other hand, Dingo is eliminated from the competition. Jack, when did I kick him? Normally, after the host announced the results, there would be boisterous cheers from the crowd. But this time, the cheers were only minimal. The reason for this was because most of the people who had placed bets had bet on Dingo winning the match. Now that he'd lost, how were they supposed to celebrate? Celebrate for losing the money that they had thought that would bring them even more? No way that was going to happen. Although the gamblers didn't cheer, there were those that didn't bet. They were cheering as they seemed to have found it funny the way that Dingo, who was arrogant not long ago, had been defeated. There were a few that were cheering even louder as they were the ones that had bet on the dark horse. Although most of them had placed a small stake, they still won something and this made them happy. Furthermore, they could still brag about it in front of their friends. Ha ha ha, did you see that? I told you that he would win. I thought someone told me that this wasn't a novel. But it seems that the MC is right there in the ring. So what? He was just lucky that Dingo jumped out of the ring. Why don't you go down there and try your luck and let's see how lucky you are? I think this is all a prank. They must be playing with us so that they could get our money. That's right, we bet on that Dingo, only for him to lose in such an embarrassing way. There were different discussions from the crowd. Everyone had their own opinion about this match. But at the end of the day, even if this match was rigged, there was nothing that they could do about it. After all, this wasn't their first time here. They had already seen the situation where those who dared to make such claims in front of the big bosses were crippled. From that moment, nobody dared to shout something like that. But again, there were several times that they had won the bets that they had placed. So, to know if the match was rigged, they would just have to wait for Jack's next match. What the heck was Dingo doing in the ring? Was he even serious about fighting? Damn it, I just lost my $500,000 just like that. What's $500,000? I lost $2 million on that idiot. Just wait, I'm going to teach him a good lesson after tonight's competition is over. Ah. I just made a bet worth $5 million and they were lost in such a stupid way? I want to kill someone. Who's the one that said that Silver is a newbie? Does that look like a newbie to you? Stop being unreasonable. Didn't you see that Silver was formidable? In the VIP room, shouts of anger could be heard. As big shots were here, the bets that they placed were worth a good amount of dollars. Although it was a trial one and they didn't dare to place something that they couldn't afford to lose, they still won't accept having their hard-earned money being thrown away in such a stupid way. Edwin, you and Linus aren't good people. Did you plot something with that Dingo and Silver? As the others were still cursing and lamenting, Austin looked at Edwin and Linus as he asked. Of all the people that had placed their bets in this round, the two were the only ones that had won. Furthermore, he too had placed a bet of $3 million that Jack would surely lose. If Jack lost, not only would he earn some dollars from the bet, he would also win the bet between Jack and him. But now, he had not only lost the bet, but he'd also began having bad premonitions about the bet that he'd made with Jack. But there was nothing that he could do other than making do with what he had and pray that he would make Jack lose. Although he was confident that Jack wouldn't win the championship, there was no harm in taking precautions. Previously, he had sent Scarred Tiger to make trouble for Jack and if possible, injure him before the match. But it turned out that the plan hadn't succeeded as Jack had come to the ring in perfect condition. Your mother. Since when did your dog eyes see me making such shady deals? If you did something, stop throwing blames on others. Edwin retorted. Currently, he was in a very good mood. It seemed that Jack was his lucky star. After all, not only had he purchased the company from his hands, he had also made him win extra $250 million. Now, he was regretting not having placed a higher stake. Otherwise, he would surely have won a lot. But he could do that in the next round that Jack was going to fight. Why you? Austin pointed his finger at Edwin as he almost burst with anger. Though, he was quite guilty as he thought that Edwin had found out his plan as he had indeed planned on doing something. So what if you know? There's nothing that you can do about it. Now that the fighters are in the locker room and we're not allowed to enter or contact them, it's obvious that Scarred Tiger will do it. Then, let's see what you'll do after that brat loses. Austin thought to himself as he decided to ignore Edwin. You surely got a good seedling. Linus said as he let out a sigh. What do you mean? Edwin asked in confusion. Stop playing dumb, will you? I know that you've gotten that kid over there to help you win some cash from betting, right? Linus chuckles as he replied. You've gotten it all wrong, Linus. With my status, I'm not eligible to hire him to do something for me personally. Edwin shook his head as he smiled bitterly. Linus frowned as he asked, What do you mean? He's got some good background? Maybe more than just background. He seems to have some abilities as well. After all, you can see him in the ring. And one more thing, he's the one that has just bought over my company today. The moment that Linus heard these words, it was like an explosive had been set off in his mind. He stared at Edwin wide-eyed as he asked in disbelief, Are you serious? Chapter 74, Qualifications. Maybe more than just background. He seems to have some abilities as well. After all, you can see him in the ring. And one more thing, he's the one that has just bought over my company today. The moment that Linus heard these words, it was like an explosive had been set off in his mind. He stared at Edwin wide-eyed as he asked in disbelief, "Are you serious?" "Of course I am." Furthermore, he bought it and paid immediately in full. There was no suspense at all. Edwin felt amused by Linus's reaction. He felt good bragging about Jack. "You mean that he paid billions of dollars on the spot? Didn't you just decide to sell that company of yours just 2 weeks ago?" If he knew about it 2 weeks ago, to be able to collect over $3 billion in just 2 weeks, he must have a terrifying background. Linus muttered with shock written on his face. Edwin laughed as he said proudly, "What weeks? He only knew about it yesterday and today. He came to buy it from me." If a stranger heard how Edwin was boasting, he would think that Jack was his son. Linus was not the only one that was shocked by Edwin's words. Since Austin was seated next to the two, he obviously heard that Jack was rich. And from his ability to be able to gather billions within a day, it was a sure bet that he was richer than he was. As he thought how he was talking about Jack being a fighter that had been bought over by Edwin, he couldn't help but shiver. Now, he could understand why Edwin referred to Jack as Mr. It wasn't that his standards had fallen, it was just that his standards had risen as Edwin had never called him Mr. before. But at the end of it all, he simply thought of a situation where Jack lost the bet. So, it seemed that he didn't need to worry about Jack not being able to keep his far end of the deal. Jack got back into the locker room under the gaze of thousands of pairs of eyes. But his expression never changed at all. It wasn't like winning against Dingo was something big. Currently, he was trying to think if there was a way that he could use to directly reach the finals. After all, the preliminaries were just a waste of time to him. After getting back into the waiting room, he found that the way that the fighters here looked at him had changed. And they seemed to respect him at this moment as nobody came over to disturb him. Jack enjoyed being left alone. If he had come here with his phone, he surely would have began playing games to pass time. It was just that they didn't allow fighters to come in with the communication devices. This would prevent shady deals from happening when the match were happening. After all, although they might make a deal before entering the locker room, there was no way that they could know who they were going to fight against. Jack now had decided to sleep and not waste his time watching the boring fights. After all, he didn't think that there was a person that could compete with him. The only one that aroused part of his curiosity was definitely Mad Lion. But even so, Jack wasn't much interested. As he slept on his seat, he ignored the others that were called on stage to fight or were watching the matches on the screen that had been projected in the locker room. About 2 hours later, just when he was getting bored, the first preliminary round ended. Jack was finally called to the stage after the second match of the second round. The fight was simple as this time. Jack didn't want to waste too much time. He simply attacked as soon as the match began. He threw a kick towards the opponent that wanted to charge towards him. This opponent wasn't prepared for Jack to go on offense as soon as the match began. From Jack's previous match, he had thought that Jack wouldn't be active just like before. But it seemed that he had been greatly mistaken. So, the only thing that he could do was to try and block the attack. So, he raised both of his arms in front of him in order to block the kick. Bang! Boom! The moment that Jack's foot connected with his raised arms, the guy was sent flying backwards before hitting the ground. With Jack's precise control over his strength, he had made sure that the force of the impact was enough to knock the guy out but not to badly injure him. The host and the spectators were surprised by the scene. They hadn't expected that Jack was this strong. Strong enough to knock out a good fighter with a single attack. The other fighters that were watching immediately held in their breaths at this moment. They couldn't help but shiver at the thought that they were going to face Jack. Furthermore, they had just mocked him for wearing a mask. They praised themselves for not making trouble for him during the past 2 hours. Otherwise, they surely would have suffered a lot. The crowd cheered for Jack as this time, they had learnt their lessons as most of them had bet on Jack winning the fight. From now on, Silver is going to be my idol. He's so strong. Just look at him, just a single attack and he defeated an opponent. Who was that shouting loudly that he had rigged the match with Dingo? Come out right now and let me scorn you. Ha, so what if he won just now? It's not like he's the strongest fighter here, right? Right your head. When have you seen another fighter winning the match by using a single attack? Hey Dark Horse, why are you crying? Shouldn't you be jumping up and down after winning the bet? I lost the bet, sob asterisk sob asterisk. How did you lose the bet when you bet on silver? Who told you that I bet on silver? Why you didn't? Of course not. How can I be called Dark Horse if I bet on the popular guys that are expected to win? Guys, where's that person that said that this isn't a novel where the MC is overpowered and wins in his first debut? Come and let me see how confident you are about what you said. Kaya. I can't believe that I'm in a novel. Where's the author? I want to thank him for giving me this chance to appear in the novel. Get lost. You're trying to look for the author when you're just an ignorable side character? I'm sure that the author doesn't even know your name. Why do you care? It's not like you're not happy to be in a novel, right? You too, stop blabbering nonsense there. What novel? Do you see that I'm made of ink or letters? If you're inside a novel, don't bring me in. Now, who mentioned you? Do you even have the qualifications to appear in a novel? The crowd chattered about as they were mostly excited. On the other hand, the VIP room was active at this moment. I never thought that he was this fierce. Although he's not that bulky, he sure has a lot of strength in those muscles of his. Ha ha ha, I won again. I have recovered all the money that I lost in the previous match. As they were chattering, a middle-aged man entered the room. The moment that they saw him, those that were laughing immediately stopped as they respectfully gazed at this man. He was Calvin, the manager of the Ultimate Arena. He was a manager, but still, they gave him a lot of respect. Of course, that wasn't because of his strength, it was mainly due to the fact that he had a strong backing. The real owner of the arena was a big figure that they couldn't offend. Upon noticing that everyone was paying attention to him, Calvin spoke. J.K. Silver has shown great abilities in the previous matches. As a result, if his next match is like the one that he's just won, he would have the qualifications to continue fighting tomorrow during the semis. In other words, he will skip all the nonsense below and directly participate in the semis together with Mad Lion and Vulture. As for Gibby, he would start from the quarterfinals. The moment that these words were said, the bosses here didn't seem surprised. This was what they had always been doing. Apart from saving time, they would be saving themselves from the losses that came from betting on Jack when he won the matches. After saying his piece, Calvin walked out of the VIP room and went out to meet with Jack. Austin, on the other hand, had his face already pale. After all, he had bet with Jack for 90% of his accumulated wealth. And, although he'd been trying to make things hard for Jack using Scarred Tiger, it seemed that Scarred Tiger hadn't made a move yet. This baffled him. And now, just like heaven's favorite Jack, he was going to reach the semis as long as he won the next match. Now, the only thing that Austin could pray for was for Scarred Tiger to carry out the plan at this moment, before the next round. Otherwise, he would have to depend on others during the semifinals. Oh, you're already getting scared? Edwin's mocking voice reached Austin from the side. Chapter 75, at the very bottom of the pyramid. Oh, you're already getting scared? Edwin's mocking voice reached Austin from the side. You're the one that's getting scared. Do you think that I'm like you? Although he was scared that Jack would win the bet, there was no way that he was going to show any weakness in front of Edwin. He had always been trying to compete against Edwin's safety enforcers. He would always try to get the best fighters here so that his company could have stronger employees. The stronger the bodyguards, the higher the price the client had to pay. Although he had heard that Edwin had already sold his security company, there was no way that he could stop competing. In any case, he was the one that had lost most of the times that he had been competing with Edwin. If he could win against him even after he changed the industry that he engaged in, Austin would surely have something to brag about. The competition went on as the fighters participated. At first, there were a total of 182 fighters. The top 3 didn't participate in the preliminaries. The remaining 179 fighters would face each other in a one-on-one fight. Since it was an odd number, there would be 2 fighters for each round. In the end, the last person that would be lucky not to be randomly selected to fight in the first round would enter the second round directly. Again, this would bring a total of 90 fighters in the second round. After the end of the second round, there would be 45 fighters remaining. And just like in the first round, there would be someone that would be lucky to directly enter the next round. The same will happen for the following rounds till there are only 5 people remaining. These 5 with the top 3 would be able to enter the quarterfinals. But at the end of it all, during the quarterfinals, only the second runner-up would participate. As for the previous champion and his runner-up, they would participate in the semifinals. Every month, there are only 2 spots available for others to try winning the championship. As long as one was able to maintain the second position, he would be able to reach the semifinals by default. During Jack's third match, the results were just like the previous one. As a result, as he was going back to the locker room, he met with the manager of the arena, Calvin. He was then told that he could skip all the remaining matches and enter the semifinals directly. Before giving the answer, Jack asked, "Angel, does skipping the preliminaries affect the essence of the competition?" Not at all. If this was any other competition and there were no those that had the advantage of skipping matches, you skipping a few matches would affect the competition evaluation by the system. But since the competition allows it, there's no problem at all. It was only after Jack heard these words that he agreed with Calvin. He certainly wouldn't want anything that would affect the results and reason for him participating in the competition. He was here to win the championship for the system mission as well as FSP, the fly swatting plan. Well, the FSP came in between, but that didn't affect Jack at all, as at the end of the day, he was here to win the match to complete the system's task. After confirming that there was no need for him to waste time on those lower-ranked people, Jack went towards the locker room. After changing his clothes, he went to the area that was confiscating his phone and took it back. Then, he headed to the VIP room where Edwin was. Although he wasn't interested in watching the other matches and wanted to take his leave, it wouldn't be good if he simply left without telling Edwin. The moment that he entered the room, several eyes landed on him. Since Jack was wearing a mask on his face while in the ring, there were only a few who could recognize him or guess his identity in the room. "Hey kid, what are you doing here?" A man with black shades asked as he glanced at Jack. Looking at the man, Jack couldn't help but wonder if this person's eyes were so good. Or maybe, he had some kind of eye disability that would get worse as long as the eyes were exposed to light? Jack wasn't sure about it. But all the same, the fact remained to be that, in the underground arena, although it was lit, why would someone wear shades in an area that was only illuminated by bulbs? Besides, it was not like the lights that illuminated the ring were reflected to the VIP room. Anyway, Jack threw the questions out of his mind as that didn't concern him. As for the question that this guy had asked, Jack simply ignored it and headed towards where Edwin was seated. It seemed that Edwin hadn't noticed his presence the moment that he entered, as Jack could see that he was chatting with Linus. Jack had met with Linus during the registration period. He was the one that had helped in arranging the bet between Jack and Austin. "Kid, I'm talking to you and you dare to ignore me? How dare you? I'll have to teach you a lesson, it seems." The man with shades was infuriated the moment that Jack ignored him. One had to know that all of those present here were figures worth at least 10 million. So, it was obvious that they would have their own pride. The shades guy rushed towards Jack and blocked his path. "Chill down, Chiton, that's silver." A lady pulled the guy with shades to the side and whispered into his ears. When he heard these words, Chiton felt a chill coursing through his spine. But, after he regained his composure, he looked at Jack and said, "So what if he's silver? Ain't he just a lousy barbarian fighter? I can pay other fighters to beat him up." One more thing you don't know is that, when I was closer to Edwin, I overheard his conversation with Linus. He said that, this silver bought his safety enforcers. You have to know that safety enforcers is worth billions. But, this silver bought it at a go and paid everything in full. The lady whispered as her eyes sparkled as she gazed at Jack. Although she was already in her late 30s, there were always old cows that wanted young grass. Chetan immediately shut his mouth at this moment. It just so happened that he was the poorest amongst the big bosses. Everyone here was worth at least $100 million. On the other hand, he was worth $10 million. And that was barely holding in as currently, his company was facing some problems. If there was another obstacle, not to mention maintaining the net worth of $10 million, he would go bankrupt. It turned out that he was the one that was pulling down the rating of the bosses in the room. He was at the very bottom of the pyramid. The reason as to why he was able to sit with the big bosses here was due to his relationships. One of the big bosses here was his uncle. He was the one that had invited him over. But he had to seat closer to the door. That was the exact reason as to why he was the first to see Jack. As to why he was aggressive in front of Jack, it was just like how a snake would harass a rat after suffering from the pressure in the presence of a hawk. He tried to release the nervousness and pressure in his heart the moment that he saw Jack. Who would have thought that Jack was a big shot than the ones that had been giving him pressure? He had previously thought that he was a snake. Who would have thought that he was the rat? A rat trying to show off in front of the hawk? He shrank his neck and sat as far as possible from Jack to make sure that Jack wouldn't notice him lest Jack decided to deal with him. Nevertheless, it was simple for a billionaire to deal with a small millionaire like him. Jack had no interest in someone that didn't even know who he was. He simply ignored that guy and headed to Edwin. Now, several eyes had landed on him as they scrutinized him. They were curious about Jack. Although there were some of them that wanted to ask, they held back their curiosity upon knowing about Jack from the whispers that had already begun spreading in the room. "Mr. Jack, you're already here." Edwin got onto his feet as he welcomed Jack with a warm smile on his face. Jack revealed a faint smile as he nodded. "I came to bid goodbye for now. I got to get somewhere to rest first. Tomorrow, I'd like to visit the company," Jack stated. "Okay then. Since there are no interesting matches, I guess I will leave with you." Now that Edwin had sold the security company, he didn't need to pull in the fighters. That was something that he would leave to Jack. So, Jack left with Edwin and Linus under the gazes of the bosses in Austin who till this moment had his fists clenched. Chapter 76, Do You Have a Girlfriend? It was already 10 in the night when Jack got a room to stay in. It was inside a 5-star hotel called Cheetah. Jack had checked into a presidential suite and it cost him a total $63,000 a night. Just like always, there was income that came from the daily sales of the grocery department. Although the money that is earned from the sales weren't sent to his account, at the end of the day, it is still multiplied by the system. After the money is multiplied by 100 times, the system would leave the original amount that was earned in the grocery department accounts. As for the balance of the multiplied, it is all sent to his current account. Flyers Bank savings account balance is $5,124,324,890. This was his current balance after paying the cost of staying in the suite for a whole week. Jack wanted to use this week to stabilize things here and expand if possible. He had already taken a shower and was just looking through the posts in the internet when a pop-up notification showed that he had received a message from TM, "Text me." When he tapped it, he found that it was a text from Celine. Since they had parted the previous day, they hadn't talked again. Now that she texted him, he remembered that he could at least pass his time chatting before sleeping. It won't be bad to create his mood for sleeping by chatting with a beautiful lady. "Celine, hello there. You sleep yet?" "Jack, hello, I've yet to sleep. But, it seems that I won't have a chance to sleep." "Celine, you're busy with something?" "Jack, yeah, I'm busy chatting with a beautiful lady." After Jack replied, there was no reply for about a minute before a reply came through. "Celine, you sure know how to tease girls." "Jack, you're the only girl that I've ever teased." Back in Inchoate City, inside her room in the presidential suite in Glaze Hotel, Celine blushed the moment that she read the reply that Jack had sent. "Is he trying to tell me something?" she asked herself. A smile subconsciously appeared on her face as she typed a reply. Celine, well, that's what all men say. Seeing this reply, Jack raised his brows. Well, I'm telling the truth. Anyway, it doesn't matter if they all say the same thing like I do. He then typed a reply. Jack, you should know that I'm not all men. I'm me. Celine chuckled upon the reply as she thought, surely men don't lack a reply for every question. Then, she thought for a moment before replying. Celine, anyway, I was busy today in that I didn't visit your office. Grace told me that you two have met. What do you think of her? Upon seeing that she had changed the topic, Jack moved with the flow. Jack, from her academic qualifications and experience, she's good. As for the performance, that would need at least a week for the evaluation to begin. Celine, I'm happy that you're satisfied with her for now. Oh, why is it that you're going to start evaluating her within just a week? Jack, I think that a week should be enough for me to start seeing the changes. The grocery department is one that has sales on a daily basis. So, even if there's only a minimal change, it is a change nevertheless. So, it would only depend on whether or is a positive or negative one. Celine had to agree with Jack on this. If he was thinking about seeing bigger positive changes within a week, he would need a large amount of capital. But upon seeing that Jack didn't seem to be looking forward to bigger changes, she nodded. Sometimes, it was good to take things slowly. If Jack had known about her thoughts, he would have simply laughed it off and said, capital? A whole billion to boost the services, sales and other things in the department. That was enough to ensure that there were bigger changes within just a few days as long as the one that was handling things was decisive enough. Celine, it's good that things are okay. Jack, how are you doing on your part? Considered moving to the building yet? Celine thought for a moment and made a decision. Celine, in the future, if the company grows, I'll tell my friend to move it there. Currently, it's still small and there's no need for the whole floor. The building that we're occupying currently isn't bad. Seeing that Celine didn't seem to want to move the office to the building, Jack didn't pursue that. If she wanted to do that, she would. But now that she seemed to be having plans of her own, Jack wouldn't interrupt them. Jack, you're welcome at any time. I'll reserve a floor for you as long as you tell me the number that you would like to occupy. Celine, okay. You free tomorrow? I would like your help with something. At this moment, Celine was thinking about dealing with something in Inchoate City. Jack seemed to have formed a bond with the youngsters of Inchoate City. On the other hand, although her family was strong, it was mainly based in the capital. No matter how strong they were, their influence in Inchoate City was small and she was bound to face some problems. Jack, that's going to be a problem for now as I'm in Venture City at the moment. Celine was surprised the moment that she found out that Jack was no longer in Inchoate City. She wondered if he had an emergency or had some business to do in Venture City. Although she didn't ask what he was doing there, she felt a little disappointed that he didn't inform her before leaving. When she noticed that her mood seemed to have dropped, she couldn't help but be surprised at herself. What's up with me? Why is it that I wanted him to tell me when he was leaving? It's not like we're that much familiar for him to tell things like that. Celine, okay then, I won't disturb you. Good night. Jack was stunned the moment that he saw the reply. What's up with her? Does she think that I don't want to help her and she's angry with me? Jack's heart tightened for a moment before he typed. He could see that she had yet to go offline. So, he was sure that she would see the text. Jack, wait a moment. What trouble are you facing? Maybe I can help you even if I'm not there. Celine was just about to exit the app when she saw Jack's text. She hesitated for a moment before reading it. She had wanted to end the conversation at this moment because she had started feeling uneasy. It was as if something that was hers was about to get snatched from her grasp. She didn't understand what was the reason behind this. But, at the end if at all, she just decided to stop chatting with Jack and calm herself down for a moment as at this time, there were several questions that were running in her mind. What are you doing there? Is there a girl that you're seeing? Or do you already have a girlfriend? These questions were ringing in her mind again and again, and she was getting an impulse to ask. She was afraid that if she didn't stop now, she would end up asking such a question. And considering that they were just getting to know each other, Jack might feel that she was invading his personal issues. This might as well result in the relationship that they were having now to collapse. After reading it for a moment, she replied, "Celine, there are some gangsters that seem to be loitering around the building that the company is located. From the way that they are behaving, I can see that their target is the company. I'm not sure why they're targeting the company or me. But, at the end of the day, they are a danger that might as well erupt in the next moment. What's more is that, since my connections here are shallow, I can't find who sent them there. I can't call the police as long as they don't do something that breaks the law." Celine was really exasperated at the moment. The moment that she began typing, she suddenly felt like she could tell Jack all that was in her mind at the moment. At this moment, she suddenly forgot about the impulses as she laid out the troubles in her heart. The moment that Jack read the words gangsters, he immediately felt something wasn't right. The moment that he found out that they seemed to be targeting Celine, instinctive anger began welling inside his heart, and he almost got out of the suite to fly back to Inchoate to deal with the mastermind. It was only after a moment of taking a deep breath that Jack was finally able to keep his calm. He still had a mission to complete and a bet to win. There was still a company that he still needed to make changes to. "Jack, can you make it possible for them not to attack during this week? I'll be there at the end of this week or earlier to deal with them for you." Although Celine couldn't hear his words and could only read them, she could feel the confidence in these words. This made her heart calm. But, it was also at this moment that the impulses came back. She had just typed "thank you" on the screen when she suddenly added a few more words. By the time that she realized it, she had already sent the text. "Celine, thank you. I'll try to stall them for a week. If I may ask, do you have a girlfriend?" Chapter 77, Smashing Cars. "Celine, thank you. I'll try to stall them for a week. If I may ask, do you have a girlfriend?" Throughout all of this time, Jack had never expected such a question coming from Celine. He wondered why she asked that question. Or she wanted to date him? He wasn't sure about it. Anyway, there was no harm in telling her the truth. So, Jack typed the reply. "Jack, not really. Do you want to take the post?" Of course, the last question was just to tease her. Although he didn't know what his feelings towards her were, not unless he confirmed, there was no way that he would start a relationship with her. Furthermore, he could still remember the words that his mother had told him when she gave him the envelope. She had clearly stated that if he ever wanted to start a relationship, he had to open the envelope. And since he was sure that he wasn't ready yet, he hadn't opened the envelope. On the other hand, Celine, who was just berating herself for sending such a message, was both stunned and excited. She was surprised that Jack would give her such a reply without complaining about her involvement in his personal life. As for the reason of the excitement, she herself wasn't sure about it, but what she could make out of it was that she was happy that he didn't have a girlfriend at this moment. As for the question that Jack had just asked, although she had an impulse to reply yes, she knew that he was just joking. In any case, how could she become his girlfriend yet they hadn't known each other for more than a week? Although it was a week, this was the third time that they were communicating. Although they had shared some of their experience, loves and hates, it wasn't to the extent that they could say they knew each other well. "Celine, I'll pass." The duo chatted for over an hour before Jack decided to say goodnight, because he had some other things that he had to take care of during the day, and in the evening, he would be having a fight. Although he was sure that the person that he was going to fight wasn't strong enough to give him any kind of difficulties, it was still better to be ready for anything. Early the next morning, after Jack woke up, it was only then that he realized that he had only come with a single pair of clothes. In other words, other than the suit that he was wearing the previous day, he had no other clothes to change into. Shaking his head, Jack decided to take his breakfast first before going to buy a few pairs of clothes. In the end, he was going to stay in Venture City for almost a week, and there was no way that he was going to stay in the same pair of clothes for all this while. It didn't take long for Jack to reach a mall that sold the clothes. It was called Campin Mall, a leading mall in Venture City. With him wearing a suit, he didn't encounter any snobbish salesperson. After buying a few pairs of clothes, just so as to make it movements in the city convenient, he decided to buy a car. Of course, he already had enough luxury. What he wanted currently was something that could help him in moving around. He simply bought a Mercedes-Benz E-Class at a price of $570,000. Buying the clothes that were made from cashmere cost him $100,000. In total, his current balance was $5,123,654,890. The legal procedures of the car took about half an hour to get completed. Immediately after that, Jack went to the hotel to change. They had agreed to meet today at 10 so that Edwin could show him around the company. Jack had to know those that were in charge of the company currently, as he wasn't going to start taking care of the company himself. But if they lacked money, that was something that Jack didn't lack at the moment. In fact, he could give it a boost by investing more money to make the company become bigger. The moment that he arrived in the parking lot of the hotel, he found that there were several parking spots that had already been occupied. In other words, the parking space was almost full with a single space left. He wasn't sure why all of a sudden there were many cars here. But what he was sure about was the fact that there might be a party, a conference or a meeting between big bosses in the hotel. He was just about to park the car when suddenly, he heard a car's honking from behind. Looking behind via the rearview mirror, Jack could see that there was a blue Lamborghini Diablo. Although it was more expensive than his Mercedes-Benz E-Class, Jack didn't think much of it. After all, he could afford it considering that it was only worth about $3 million. He had a Bugatti Veyron that was worth tens of millions of dollars. So, there was no way that he would just behave like the owner of the Lamborghini behind him was worth a lot of respect from him to the extent of giving away a parking space. So, he simply parked his car and ignored the person that was busy honking at him. Upon noticing that he'd been ignored, the other party was of course not pleased. So, the doors of the Lamborghini opened and a young man with branded clothes from Versace alighted, followed by a lady with a thick makeup. Can you get that piece of crap from my parking space?" The guy shouted at Jack as he strode towards Jack aggressively. Jack ignored him and headed towards the elevator that was in the parking lot. He had no time to deal with these nouveau riches that only knew how to flaunt their parents' wealth. The guy simply ran towards Jack's car and stepped on its rear left tire while looking at Jack, who didn't seem to want to stop, as he said, "If you don't remove this piece of junk from here, I'll smash it for you." When Jack heard these words, his steps halted. He had just bought the car because he wanted something that could make it convenient for him to move around the city. Now, someone was threatening to destroy it only after he'd bought it? Although it wasn't expensive for Jack, it was time-consuming for him to go back to the shop to buy another one. There was no way that he was going to do that, as he still had other important things that he needed to handle. He looked at the guy that was already stepping on the tires of his car and said simply, "If you do that, I'm afraid I'll have to reciprocate the favor." Jack's words were clear to the ears of the duo. If they dared to smash his car, he would in turn smash theirs. At the end of the day, this guy would be the one that would suffer great losses. "Ha ha ha, did I just hear your words correctly? You can smash my car? Do you think that you can afford it? Wearing a suit makes you think that you're a big shot?" The guy laughed out loudly as he looked at Jack contemptuously. The girl that had thick makeup on chuckled as she looked at Jack. She said, "Garpy, this is a country bumpkin. He definitely doesn't know his place." She then looked at Jack with disdain as she said, "Do you know how much that car costs?" Without waiting for Jack's reply, she continued, "It is worth $3 million if you add the cost of customization. Even a single scratch, I'm afraid that you won't be able to afford to repaint it." Just a few $1,000,000 was nothing in front of Jack, not to mention a few $1,000s. So, he looked at the guy called Garpy and said, "Just try it and stop wasting my time." And immediately after that, he turned around and headed towards the elevator without looking back. Garpy looked at Jack's departing back and his expression turned gloomy. He sneered, "Since you don't believe words, I have no choice but to use actions to show you what I mean." And with that, Garpy looked around the parking lot and found a stone as big as a basketball and threw it towards the Mercedes-Benz's rear windshield. Crash! The stone that was thrown with great strength immediately made the rear windshield dome and as countless cracks were formed. Additionally, the area around the car's boot was deformed. The moment that Jack heard the sound of a glass window being broken, his eyes immediately turned cold. He turned his head and saw that Garpy had really smashed his car with a stone. Furthermore, he was taking the stone, ready to smash the car again. Looking around, Jack found a fire extinguisher. He picked it up and slowly walked towards the Lamborghini Diablo. There was no need for him to talk, just actions were enough to prove his words. Garpy and his girl were enjoying the thrill of smashing another's car when suddenly, they heard a loud crashing sound coming from behind them. The moment that they saw what was happening, their faces paled. Garpy couldn't believe that this guy really had the guts to smash his car. He had smashed Jack's car because he thought that Jack had no background at all. Furthermore, he himself wasn't someone simple as he was from the capital. Although his family wasn't that big in the capital, in a place like Venture City, he could be said to be a force to be reckoned with. Since Venture City was closer to the central province, his family's influence was good enough for him to do almost anything. Although he had smashed Jack's car, using his family's connections, he could just pay a few $1,000s if Jack called the police. But Jack smashing his car was completely out of his expectations. With rage in his eyes, he looked at Jack as he shouted, "How dare you smash my car? Can you afford to pay for it?" Chapter 78, I'm engaged. How dare you smash my car? Can you afford to pay for it? Garpy's voice was loud to reach Jack's ears. But, since he had destroyed his car, Jack had to return the favor. Although Garpy had only smashed the rear windshield, Jack was going to make sure that this car turned into nothing other than scrap metal that couldn't be repaired. Bang! Crash! Smash! Boom! With Jack's current strength, with the help of the fire extinguisher container, he easily turned the body of the Lamborghini into nothing but waste metal. Currently, it was almost flattened. On the other hand, Garpy was hopping mad. Someone had just destroyed his car that was worth millions of dollars. If he didn't make him repay that with an interest, then he wasn't Garpy at all. He took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, you guys get down here at this moment. There's a punk that doesn't know his place. We'll be there in a moment." A reply came from the other side before the call was ended. Garpy looked at Jack, who hadn't stopped even after the car's body had been flattened. He was already destroying the tires. Although Garpy could buy another car, it would surely affect the way that the family thought of him. In any case, he had only recently bought the car. If he bought another, they would think that he was misusing the money. "Punk, you're not going to get out of here. Just you wait." The girl with thick makeup shouted at Jack. She was enjoying moving around in such a cool sports car. Now that it had been destroyed, it was obvious that she could no longer enjoy it unless Garpy bought another car. Not long after Jack finished his masterpiece, a group of around 20 youths rushed out of the elevator. All of them were young men wearing branded clothes. They immediately rushed towards Jack's direction and surrounded him before they began sneering at him. "You sure have guts, kid. Do you know what you've done? We're going to make sure that you won't leave this place alive. To dare smash Garpy's new Lamborghini, I don't know if you're brave or an idiot." Jack ignored the young masters that had surrounded him. If this was before he gained the professional combatant ability, he would surely be flustered being attacked by over a dozen people at the same time. Nevertheless, at that time, although he was strong due to visiting the gym on a daily basis, there was no way that he could deal with these guys if they attacked him at the same time. But now, even if they attacked him at the same time, considering the fact that most of them had weak physiques as they didn't train at all, Jack could beat them up without a problem. So, he simply looked at the watch in his hand and saw that time was running. He still had to change his clothes before Edwin arrived. Otherwise, he would be late. Thinking of this, he decided to leave. If they dared to try stopping him, he wouldn't mind teaching these brats a good lesson. On the other hand, the elevator opened again. This time, over a dozen girls with exquisite makeup on and branded clothes rushed out. Looking at the far end of the parking lot, they saw the boys had surrounded someone and it seemed that a fight would start at any moment. This group of youths came from the capital to have fun. They had decided to meet in Venture City before going to different other cities to enjoy the scenery. They were supposed to meet up here and plan about what they were going to do. Now, they were just about to start discussing when Garpy told them that there was a person that had caused him problems. As a group of friends, they would always stand for each other. So, they all rushed out of the suite that they had just gathered in. Since the elevator was small and it couldn't fit all of them, they decided that men would go out first before girls followed them. Amongst the girls that were heading to the scene, there was an absent-minded girl. If Steve was here, he sure would have recognized her as the girl that had gone to Alfonso family for the engagement with Jack. Currently, her thoughts were wandering around, wondering when she was going to meet Jack. She couldn't help but blush from time to time the moment that she thought about the marriage that was to occur a little over a year from now. "Wendy, what's up with you today? You've been blushing since you came. Have you found a boyfriend or something?" A girl with her bangs blocking her left eye asked as they walked towards the scene. Oh, what were you saying?" Wendy looked at the girl, but it was obvious from her question that she had been absent-minded not long ago. "Do you have a boyfriend?" the girl asked with raised brows. What are you talking about? You better stop spouting nonsense." Wendy blushed as she thought of Jack. She had met with Jack before and she happened to fall in love with him since a year ago. She could remember how it was that day. She had gone to Crystal City together with this group of friends at that time, just like what they were planning to do now. At that time, she had a problem with her stomach. As a result, she had stayed in the washroom for a long period of time, and that by the time that she came out, she found that her friends had already left. Flashback: as she was leaving the restaurant, she was just about to cross the road to the other side where her friends were, when she was pulled back and she landed into a guy's chest. The exact moment that she was pulled back, a car sped past. Had she not been pulled back in time, that car would surely have knocked her. With the speed that the car was being driven at, it would be a miracle if she managed to survive after the accident. Although she was just about to lash out at the person that had pulled her back and made her land onto his chest, she was forced to swallow her words as her body shook the moment that she felt the breeze that came with the passing of the speeding car. There was no need to ask about anything. She had just been saved from getting killed. After a few seconds, the person that had saved her held her shoulders as he pushed her back from his embrace. She raised her head and looked at his face for the first time. She noticed that well-carved face, those blue eyes and the unique short silver hair. This guy was so handsome. You better be careful when you're crossing the road next time. And with that, he left, not waiting for her thank you nor asking for anything in return for saving her. The thing that she noticed was that, other than his clothes that looked cheap, his figure was good. When she was on his chest, she felt his chest muscles clearly. From that moment, she had gotten smitten by him. She fell in love with him, and this love continued growing till she couldn't hold it in anymore. Since she hadn't thanked him all this while, she decided that she would marry him as a thank you. So, she asked for her grandfather's help. End of flashback. Look at your expression. It's obvious that you have a boyfriend and you're trying to hide it, aren't you? The girl with bangs asked again. You changed a lot since we went out last year. What happened to you? Your behavior has been particularly strange since yesterday, and today, it has gone a step further. The girl continued. Wendy wasn't a shy girl that she was at this moment. She was a decisive girl back then. If a person dared to tease her, she would definitely make him pay for it. But suddenly, her character changed suddenly a year ago. Now, she would sit absent-minded for a long time, revealing a smile from time to time. It was as if the previous Wendy and the current one were two different people. Wendy pulled the girl closer and whispered to her ears, Angie, you better keep what I'm telling you a secret or else, I won't be your friend anymore. Look, I just got engaged 2 days ago. I'll be married when I turn 21. Angie's eyes widened in disbelief when she heard these words. She was just to shout in surprise when Wendy tightly closed her mouth using her hand. She gave her a stare and Angie was forced to swallow her scream. Upon noticing that she had calmed down, Wendy let go of her mouth. But immediately after that, Angie whispered back, "How come you're engaged to someone and I know nothing about it?" Sheesh, such a gossipy person. Anyway, the engagement party will be arranged once I meet him. Wendy replied with a smile. You mean that you haven't met him yet and you're behaving in such a manner? What kind of guy is he to make you change this much? Angie couldn't help but ask. Wendy was just about to reply when they arrived at the scene. She could see that at the center of over 15 youths, there was a young man with blue eyes, silver hair and a handsome face. The moment that she saw him, her movements froze as she stared at the young man in a white suit, wide-eyed. Her cherry lips parted as she stared at the young man in disbelief. Angie happened to see her reaction. She couldn't help but look at the young man and size him up. Then, she looked at Wendy and said, "He's just a handsome guy. What's up with that exaggerated expression on your face?" Chapter 79, Don't You Dare Touch My Fiancé. The moment that she saw him, her movements froze as she stared at the young man in a white suit wide-eyed. Her cherry lips parted as she stared at the young man in disbelief. Angie happened to see her reaction. She couldn't help but look at the young man and size him up. Then, she looked at Wendy and said, "He's just a handsome guy. What's up with that exaggerated expression on your face?" Wendy gave no reply as she stepped forward towards the encirclement. Jack had no idea about Wendy. Currently, his expression hadn't changed even a little bit when facing this large group of youths. He looked at his watch again and saw that he'd just wasted a few more minutes that he could have used in doing other things. Upon seeing this, he decided not to play with these youths any longer. He ignored their mocking expressions and began walking towards the elevator. Of course, in front of him there were a few youths. And the moment that they saw that Jack had began walking, they began approaching him with ferocious smiles. "Since you dared to smash Garpy's car, we'll have to teach you a good lesson and place you in your place. Not just that, you'll have to pay for the damage that you've caused even if you have to sell some of your organs. I just happen to know where there are people that can buy these organs. What are you all talking for? Just beat him up. That's right. Anyway, let's play with him a little. If we attack him at the same time, it won't be fun at all. Let's just play with him and give him some hopes that he can escape. I'll go first then." One of the youths happened to have a bulky body. His height was already 1.93 m. He could be said to be the person with the biggest body amongst all the youths present. Furthermore, this youth just happened to be in the direction that Jack was heading to. So, the others didn't say a word and acknowledged that this guy was the one to make the first move. The youth moved towards Jack when the others stopped. But, he frowned the moment that he noticed that Jack seemed to be heading his way. It was only a moment as in the next second, the frown disappeared and in its place, a cold smile appeared. "Looks like you know yourself all too well. Come on over here so that I can finish this as fast as possible. I don't want to waste so much time on you." The guy spoke as he waited for Jack to get to him. The moment that Jack arrived in front of him, the guy took a fighting stance and was ready to start the brawl when something that he hadn't expected happened. Jack passed by the side, completely ignoring him. Bulky. Everyone? This stunned not only him, but the others as well. Jack simply walked away even though they were expecting that there would be a confrontation? "What are you doing, Terrence? Look, you're letting him get away." At this moment, Garpy yelled as he led the way to follow Jack. His shout was like a signal as the others came back to their senses and surrounded Jack once again. This time, Garpy and a few of his close friends didn't wait for Terrence to make a move. Instead, they immediately rushed towards Jack while brandishing their fists, ready to beat him to a pulp. They were just about to reach Jack when a shout made them stop and turn their gazes towards the origin of the voice. They then saw Wendy coming forward and stood in front of them, blocking their way to Jack, who was still walking away as if nothing had happened. "What are you doing, Wendy?" Garpy frowned as he looked at Wendy gloomily. "You can't attack him. I forbid that. If you dare to do so, you'll be my enemy from this moment onwards," Wendy stated with a serious voice. "Ha ha ha, Wendy, you're so funny. What joke are you playing here?" Garpy obviously couldn't believe that Wendy was going to protect Jack. All the same, they were a group of friends and he was sure that Wendy wouldn't go against him for a nobody. Although they weren't that much close, at least the relationship between him and Wendy was good enough for her to help him out if he was in problem. But that was as long as she wouldn't suffer any loss when helping him. "I'm serious about it." "So, you make your choice." Wendy had no intention of budging at all. She was serious about protecting Jack. The other youths were confused by Wendy's move. They wondered what was going on. They couldn't understand anything at all. At this time, Angie came forward and tried pulling Wendy out of the way. "What are you doing, Wendy? Are you crazy? Just because he's handsome, you want to protect him at the cost of being enemies with Garpy? Angie, you don't understand at all," Wendy replied without explaining anything. Garpy, on the other hand, had a solemn expression on his face. He couldn't understand why Wendy could go all the way to protect someone that she'd just met because he was handsome. Thinking about his car that was currently scrap metal, he decided to ignore Wendy's warning and charge towards Jack. Currently, Jack was only about 100 meters from the elevator. Seeing that Garpy was making a move even after she had warned him, she moved fast to block him. But she couldn't compare with Garpy, who was a man, as he easily got past her. He wasn't the only one that did that, as his 4 friends also managed to get past Wendy. Upon seeing this, Wendy panicked and shouted at them, "Garpy, don't you dare touch my fiancé." Her words were like an electric current that stunned everyone as everyone present in the underground parking lot stopped. Then, they all looked at Wendy with disbelief in their eyes. This guy was actually Wendy's fiancé? How? When? They couldn't understand how Jack became her fiancé. What's more, they didn't know about the engagement at all. Angie, who was holding Wendy's arm, was the most surprised of them all. She was the one that Wendy had told that she just got engaged 2 days ago. At this moment, she finally understood and couldn't help but look at Wendy incredulously. She now understood Wendy's expression when she was looking at Jack. So, it turned out that he was her fiancé. On the other hand, Jack's reaction was no different from the others. It was just that his wasn't that much exaggerated. But he too couldn't believe what he had just heard. Fiancé? Since when had he been engaged? If he remembered everything well, he had never gotten engaged. But now, there was someone that was claiming to be his fiancé? He then thought of how he had thought that there was someone that would come and claim to be his girlfriend. Back then, he only had a motorcycle that the system had rewarded him with. But now, other than the suit that he was putting on, there was nothing expensive. When looking at the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, that wasn't something that could make the girl who was obviously from a big background to claim to be his girlfriend. Wait, not girlfriend, she had even promoted herself to being his fiancée. What did that imply? That meant that he was going to marry her someday unless the engagement was annulled. Jack turned and looked at the girl with gray eyes just behind Garpy and his friends. No matter how he looked at her, he didn't have any memories of her. In other words, he had never met her before, as not only was her face unfamiliar, even her voice was unfamiliar, not to mention her figure. After failing to get anything about her in his memories, he simply shook his head and thought, maybe she got the wrong person. No, she definitely got the wrong person. But I might as well use this chance to get out of here without wasting more time on these guys. As he thought to this point, he gave Wendy one last glance before entering the elevator. The elevator closed a little while later. Wendy looked as Jack left. She was conflicted in her heart and felt bitter. The way that Jack looked at her was like that of a person meeting a stranger. She had thought that he could remember about her. Who would have thought that he didn't seem to recognize her? Although she felt bitter in her heart, she still remembered that they had only met once, and that was a year ago. Maybe he had already forgotten about the incident. On the other hand, although they were engaged, Jack wasn't there during the engagement. So, it was understandable that he wouldn't be able to recognize her. And as to why he seemed not to know about the engagement, she didn't think much of it. She simply thought that he didn't want to talk about it in front of her friends. "Wendy, are you serious that he is your fiancé?" Angie asked the moment that Jack disappeared into the elevator. She wasn't the only one that was curious about this, as all the others gazed at her with expressions that showed that they needed an explanation. Chapter 80, Safety Enforcers Security Company Headquarters. "Wendy, are you serious that he is your fiancé?" Angie asked the moment that Jack disappeared into the elevator. She wasn't the only one that was curious about this, as all the others gazed at her with expressions that showed that they needed an explanation. Wendy took a deep breath. Before, she had no intention of disclosing the fact that she was now engaged. She wanted to wait till the engagement party for her to make it public. But in this current situation, it seemed that she had no choice but to talk about it. "Well, we got engaged 2 days ago and we'll be married when I turn 21. Wendy said calmly. The moment that they heard these words, they couldn't help but wonder to themselves, what was Jack's background? To be able to become Wendy's fiancé, he must have a good background, right? They took a deep breath while thinking about how they were just about to attack him. None of those present here didn't know how Alton dotted on Wendy. And, if he had approved of Jack being her fiancé, it was obvious that he must have capabilities as well as a good status that could match her. And, if they had beaten Jack, they would have surely faced Alton's fury. Not to mention that there was still Jack's own family. Garpy gazed at the Mercedes-Benz E-Class that he'd just smashed. He now forgot about the fact that his car had been smashed, and he was thinking about what Jack would do next. Although his family wasn't that weak as compared to Wendy's Farrell family, if Jack's family collaborated with Farrell family, his Kibo family would surely have to face the music. He gulped at the thought of this. He looked at Wendy and said, "Wendy, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that he was your fiancé. Otherwise, how could I have attacked him?" "Humph." Wendy simply snorted and turned her head to the side. Seeing this, Garpy could only scratch his head. He looked at Jack's Mercedes again and decided to compensate him for it, as he had just smashed his car. Although his car was also smashed, it was his fault for smashing Jack's car first. "Wendy, why didn't you say that you were engaged before?" "Right. If you had said that earlier and introduced your fiancé to us, we surely wouldn't have dared to cause him problems." Wendy glanced at the group and said, "Now you know. You better not spread this news to the time that the engagement party is held." "Yes, yes, yes." The group of youths nodded. But of course not all the youths were happy that Wendy had been engaged. Wendy was a great beauty amongst the group, and there were several guys that were trying to hit on her. But, all this while, she had never refused them directly. Naturally, that was only till last year. After their trip to Crystal City, she had changed and began straightly refusing their proposals. Then, as time went on, as long as they mentioned anything about courting her, she would get angry and throw a tantrum. Amongst the group of youths that tried hitting on Wendy was a boy named Collins. He was the one with the best background amongst all of those present and was the one that had been the most active in pursuing Wendy. His family was stronger than Wendy's. As a result, he wasn't afraid that she would cause him problems. Although she refused him several times, he had always come back again and again to propose to her. Even during this trip, he was planning on asking her out again. But, who would have thought that she would get engaged? He clenched his fists tightly as he thought about Jack. He had seen that Jack didn't seem to care about Wendy, and that was the exact reason as to why he was even more angered. He simply thought that the guy and his family had forced the engagement on Wendy. So, he decided that he was going to solve this for her. If he managed to do that, he was sure that her impression of him would rise and there would be no problem in getting her to be his woman. As he thought of this, he made plans in his mind that would be executed as soon as possible. "Do you know when Celine is going to come back?" Angie asked Wendy with a whisper. "I don't know. Maybe we can visit her there in Crystal City. I was there yesterday, but I completely forgot about that when I was leaving with my grandpa," Wendy replied. After getting into his suite, Jack changed the clothes. And not long after, his phone rang. It was Edwin, who had already arrived and was ready to take Jack to the company and show him around. Since his car was already smashed, he would have to get another one. But that would have to wait till he finished the issue about the company. He got out of the hotel. But he didn't go to the underground parking lot, as there would be nothing that he would be doing there, as he had no car there. Moreover, he didn't want to meet with that group of people that would only delay him further. When he got out, he found that Edwin had parked his car on the roadside, not far from the hotel. Since he had no car, he had to depend on Edwin's car. As soon as he got in, Edwin welcomed him with a warm smile. "Morning, Mr. Jack." "Good morning, Mr. Edwin," Jack replied with his usual shallow smile. Edwin then began driving the car while chatting with Jack. Although Edwin was rich and could have gotten himself a chauffeur, he didn't seem to mind driving the car himself. "Mr. Edwin, are the youngsters in this city that rude? You know, one of them just smashed my car not long ago." After a while of chatting, Jack asked. Edwin's expression changed the moment Jack spoke. He couldn't believe that there was a person that had the guts to smash Jack's car. Upon noticing that Jack had no injuries on him, he let out a sigh of relief. It was only a moment later that he remembered that Jack wasn't a weakling. Then, he asked, "Do you happen to know him? If you do, I'll make sure that they pay for that." "I don't know any of them." It was a bunch of over 30 youths. "As for making them pay, there's no need for you to worry about that. I simply smashed his car after he did mine," Jack replied. Edwin was surprised that Jack did destroy the other party's car. But, upon considering Jack's status, he knew that Jack seemed not to care that much about the incident, and that was the reason as to why he left it at smashing the other party's car. Otherwise, he was sure that he could make the other party disappear just depending on his strength as a fighter or as a rich person. Anyway, what did that guy do? Edwin was curious about what that guy did when Jack smashed his car. He was sure that the youth, as hot-blooded as he was, would definitely not let things be the way that they were. "Well, he called his friends over and they decided to attack me. But, before they could strike at me, a girl suddenly stopped them, claiming that I'm her fiancé. This thing made me surprised." Jack chuckled a little while thinking about how that girl had gone against all those that wanted to attack him. In the end, she said that he was her fiancé. Although Jack would have thought that she was just using an excuse to make the others not to attack him, he could clearly feel that she was serious. Furthermore, the look in her eyes spoke all words that needed to be said. "Ha ha ha, I didn't know that you already have a fiancé here. So, when is the wedding? I must attend." Edwin laughed as he asked. "What fiancé? I don't even have a girlfriend. I think that she confused me with someone else," Jack replied as he shrugged his shoulders. When Edwin heard this, he couldn't help but be flabbergasted. He wondered to himself, are youths this way nowadays? They play so much in that they even get confused on who their fiancé is. This generation seems to be developing negatively. He only thought to that point when he looked at Jack that was seated on the backseat through the rearview mirror. If he said what he was thinking, it would definitely be no different from insulting Jack, who was also a youth. But Jack was completely different, as he was serious with everything that he did. After chatting for a little longer, they finally arrived at the outskirts of the city. In this area, buildings were fewer in number and there were mainly factories that were located in these areas. Jack had already known that the headquarters of the safety enforcers was located in the outskirts of the city when he read the information on the internet. The reason for that was because they needed enough space that could be used as the training grounds. The headquarters occupied an area of more than 2 square kilometers. The training grounds took most of the space. But what was even more amazing was the fact that the whole area was surrounded by a perimeter wall of height of 4 meters. At the gate, there were a few men in black security uniforms that had the logo of safety enforcers. They opened the gate the moment that they saw Edwin's familiar car. When they got in, Jack could feel the change in the atmosphere. It was as if he had just entered a soldier's training camp. Although he could only see the 5-story building in front of him, he could guess that behind this building was where the training grounds were. He alighted alongside Edwin and entered the building. Edwin had decided to introduce the management team of the company first. Jack had nothing to say and simply followed Edwin into the building.